When it comes to climate change, there's no disagreement on whether the climate's changing or not. The cause of it, it's not worth discussing because it's multi-layered discussion. The solutions to it, though, are very shallow. They focus mostly on the idea of reducing the emission of CO2, and very rarely do we hear about the taking in of CO2 and recycling it into the biomass and improving the planet, and improving the planet's capacity to remove CO2 from the atmosphere by using recyclable water in a mass wherever it's possible, where water's not being cycled for city use or whatever, where it's possible to use any water that can be recycled and cleaned, secondary cleaned, so then it can be used to create a growing biomass that takes in CO2. The diversity of that biomass is only limited by people's imagination. But one of the functions of that creating that biomass is also creating organic food sources. That is one of the greater functions of creating a system that recycles the CO2 into organic food or trees, animals, you name it, aquaculture, you name it. All that can be done through recycling of water and taking water out of the air where that's practicable. The thing about this idea, what supports me having understanding this idea is beneficial for the planet, it's obvious and logical. And it's not about everything to do with climate change is to do with making profits for corporations as much as anything else. Everyone making panels and windmills and all the technology that goes with that and making billions out of people being subjected to this change in the way things are done according to this proscriptive corporate, political and UN proscriptive way of dealing with CO2 and climate change. We to say you can deal with climate when people live in all different regions of the world in all different climates in different weather zones and survive, and in that is a lesson in itself, because no matter how the climate changes on Earth, there will be different climatic zones on Earth unless it goes to a total desert or another ice age, and then that changes things. So they're academic. What the climate will be is academic. What you're going to do in the interim, regardless of what the end result of climate change is what is the important question is. How do you get there without doing least harm to the people? Because if harm is going to be done to the people because of all the costs involved in reducing the amount of CO2, then there's something very narrow in the strategy of the politics and corporate system, or whoever is behind that ideological approach, that particular ideological approach to dealing with the problem of what the problem is first of all, what is the problem? To stop climate change, tackle climate change, or tackle the problems that climate change may cause. At the same time, reducing the amount of CO2, at the same time having a sort of industrial revolution as far as labour reform is concerned, and using the surplus labour to plant trees, as they are doing in China. The Chinese are planting thousands of acres of forest in deserts or arid regions, mostly, partly I would suspect, to cut the dust down from going into Beijing and whatever. They get the dust storms from because of prior taking away of vegetation or prior monocultures or whatever has caused that part of the world to be eroded. The same as what's happening with very large broad acre monocultural farming. So it's an imperative that if the government cannot provide employment for people in the normal apparatus of distributing money out to create employment, and it cannot to firms and companies and corporations that then get the benefit of the transaction. They create something using these people, but they get the financial benefit out of the actual transaction and contract. So there needs to be a third arm, because the corporate system, government system, which are totally interrelated now. They're totally interlocked. There's very little to separate the government and the corporate system, because the amount of influence the corporations have on governments, it can't be denied. So the idea is then to formulate a third force, employment force, for people who are willing to volunteer. They get paid, of course. It's some sort of agreed return for what the time they put in, for the amount of time they put in. So it's a time thing, and so this third force then can be used in third force of employment, because a lot of people aren't going to get jobs in the future in the present system. But something needs to be done about climate change, and there's plenty of trillionaires in the world who can finance this. All the people attending the UN and the WEF and places like that, going on about what champions of the global climate change they all are becoming, to create a great reset, to have this wonderful idea, we're going to have a better planet, build back better. Well, but they haven't said exactly what they're going to do with surplus labour and what you're going to do about the organic contribution into this, not just the corporate and financial political contribution, but the organic contribution of using surplus labour. Those that want to, there's not going to have people who come along who don't want to work, but those that want to can work then on recycling water, like in Australia where I live in particular. They've got so much water, it's sitting there in ponds. It goes through towns, millions and millions of litres goes through towns and sit there in ponds, wasting away and evaporating. It goes on golf courses and things like that. But that's not very productive. It's a wonderful thing to do. I'm not saying it shouldn't go on golf courses. That's a wonderful thing to do. But what it can be further used for is to create ecosystems, what can create organic food, and that then will create a perpetual, if it's organised properly, a perpetual source of employment and food, and be adding to the biomass and taking CO2 in for a good purpose. So taking CO2 in works then with, as this grows, it works then with reducing the amount of CO2 by transport, etc., because you're going to change the whole equation of value to something that makes more practical sense as far as many aspects of the climate change challenge. But in particular, the one in particular about surplus labour, which is a corporate and political challenge that's being ignored. The corporate political challenge, they're ignoring the problem of surplus labour, the problem of people who are not in work, who want to work and willingly want to work, but they can't for basic either corporate or political or government prescriptions, what restricts people for one way or another from working. But working in horticulture, developing a horticultural biodynamic atmosphere ecology, then that allows anyone. You don't need any degrees, you don't need an education hardly. All you need to do is have the willingness to go and learn something about how you can gain skills, developing whatever it is using surplus water into any sort of agriculture, horticulture, any sort of thing at all you can imagine from that, which is endless and infinite in its variety, in its differential variety. It's infinite in the sense that it's up to people's imagination. People, you do not need a degree in anything to come up with an idea to actually improve any sort of thing to do with using water for growing a biomass. Anyone can then begin to contribute, because it becomes a natural system of actually naturally educating people. And it naturally educates everyone by its example about how we deal with not just climate change, but make climate change and a universal attitude towards dealing with the other aspects of climate change that's being ignored: organic food growing and employment in a way that's structured what coincides basically with a basic wage. Something like that. Some sort of basic wage employs people in developing a permanent source of food, an income, a permanent source of employment. I mean, you're creating things what take CO2 out of there, beautifying the planet, adding to the diversity, regional diversity in the area, and the endless imagination that you can go on and develop from this is absolutely infinite. And all it needs is there are so many billionaires and trillionaires and in the world flying around on jumbo jets on their own to service their own pleasures of talking about things that I think that are important to them, but what is important to them may not be important to 90% of the people on the planet. What may be important to the people on the planet is a job, a roof over the head, some food, and a little bit of freedom how you do that. And having a third, a lot of people like to be have a system where it's totally controlled, and they don't mind that. People work in institutions, people in governments, they feel secure, etc., etc. But there's also you have to accept in all societies, whether it's democracy or communism, or that in all societies, different people have different ideas about what life's all about. If we accept that, then society begins to cooperate in a more cohesive manner for a more productive result in regards to climate change and the environment and humanity. It works in it's a triplical beneficial system. And because of that, it's a new system that needs to be understood by everyone who talk about climate change. Now is a chance to put your money where your mouth is and promote an idea what grows organic food and employs millions of people, not wanted by the corporate or government sector.